Hello, my fellow Tubians, how goes it? So, I know a large number of you have asked me to review the MSI Modern series of laptops, and honestly, I would have reviewed it sooner. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get my hands on one thanks to the chip shortage. With that said, I finally did, and the configuration we have here today is rocking Intel's Core i7 1165 G7 processor, 16GB of RAM, we have 512GB of storage, also powered in the graphics department is the Intel Iris Xe chipset. Beyond that, we do have the latest Wi-Fi AX standard alongside Bluetooth 5.1. And finally, yes, this is the 15.6-inch Full HD variant. For those of you wondering, this does come with Windows 10 by default, but it is fully upgradable and legible for the Windows 11 upgrade. So as always, we're going to see if the MSI Modern 15 is kind of the laptop you've been looking for, or if it's yet just another mid-range laptop in a pile full of mid-range laptops. As always, if you guys enjoy this review, hit that like button, sub to my channel. It genuinely helps me grow and brings a smile to my face. Without further ado, let's get started. Starting off with a real quick unboxing, the first thing you'll notice is that the MSI Modern comes in a pretty standard looking cardboard box. Well, once you remove the tape on the top and the content seal, joke's on you, it actually comes in a slightly more stylish cardboard box, so you have more branding and MSI bothered to put their logo there. Once you actually open up this box, this time you have an actual laptop. And yes, of course, it has a ton of protective packaging, so once you remove all of that, here it is in all its glory. It looks sleek, but more on that in a quick minute. Beyond that, you get a standard 65-watt charging adapter, and it does come in a square shape as opposed to the traditional rectangular one. I kind of like that personally. And unfortunately, it has a proprietary charging pin, no USB-C out of the box, which is ironic since this laptop is called Modern. Not so modern in that regards, I guess. Beyond that, you also have the standard wall outlet cable, and finally, of course, you have the part that no one cares about, which is the quick start, warranty, regulation, and information stuff. Give that a quick read. As far as design goes, I have to give it to the MSI team. This laptop manages to look pretty darn sleek. And that's partially because 2/3 of the laptop actually has a nice premium metallic finish. However, with that said, this laptop does have a weight of approximately 3.54 pounds, which makes it slightly heavier than the average 15-inch laptop. However, it's not ridiculously heavy, it's just not great for all-day carry around if that's your primary intention. Now with that said, starting off with the top side of the laptop, again, you have this really nice, smooth, textureless metallic finish. It just feels really nice to the touch, and in the center area, you have that modern-looking MSI branding. As far as the rear of this laptop goes, it's got this aggressive styling, so you have two exhaust grills, one on either side, but just the way they're put is pretty sleek, again, for a productivity-based laptop. Making our way to the side of the laptop, I/O port diversity is actually quite respectable. So you have the DC charging port, a HDMI port, a USB Type-C port, and no, unfortunately, it does not support Thunderbolt 4. Beyond that, you have a USB-A port, and of course, the good old headphone jack. Now, on the other side, you have two more USB-A ports, and yes, both of these are 3.2. And finally, you have a conveniently placed microSD card reader. Making our way to the bottom of the laptop, the first thing you'll notice is that this is a hard TPU or plastic finish, if you will. You also have a nice long linear air intake vent, and yes, this is a dual fan setup, which is a welcome sight from a thermals perspective. Lastly, you'll notice on either corner you do have a speaker grill. Yes, this is a bottom firing stereo speaker setup. We'll do a sound test later on in the video. As soon as you unfold this laptop, you'll notice you have an average amount of palm rest space. It's not cramped, but it's not as open as some other 15-inch laptops out there. It's pretty average, like I said. What is disappointing, however, is that relatively small trackpad, but that's the least of your worries. The trackpad itself has a plastic surface finish, which would be okay, but this thing flexes harder than most bodybuilders. I mean, seriously, the amount of bend you get when you do a left or right click is insane. I don't know how it passed quality assurance in the first place. Thankfully, however, the actual clicks themselves are relatively well calibrated, but overall this is definitely a cheap and finicky trackpad. The keyboard, in contrast to the trackpad, is actually a pleasant experience. First and foremost, the keys are not cramped. Every keycap is nice and spacious, plenty of surface area. They're well labeled. Also, the actual keystrokes are more linear in nature, but they have just enough of a tactile click to give you a subtle amount of feedback, which actually makes for a pleasant typing experience. You'll also notice the keyboard is fully backlit with a two-tier lighting system. Now, two big drawbacks to this keyboard. First and foremost, there is no 10 key pad, which is odd because a lot of other 15-inch laptops offer this as a standard feature. Number crunchers, be aware. The second thing you'll notice is that there is no fingerprint scanner integrated into this keyboard, which again is a bit of a shame because some manufacturers around this price range do offer that. Hinge quality is also very good on this laptop, so you do have a dual hinge setup. It doesn't wobble a whole lot. You can actually lift it with a single hand, and also it tilts all the way back up to 180 degrees, which is pretty impressive for a non-touchscreen laptop. Now, the actual display fitting is interesting. So you have a moderately fat chin at the bottom, but you do have that nice MSI branding. The bezels are actually very narrow and perfectly in line with 2022 standards. With that said, you also have a pretty thin forehead. Unfortunately, in the center of it, you have a really mediocre 720p 30 FPS webcam, which is nothing to brag about. As far as the display goes, I was really hoping MSI would kind of stand out from the crowd with their modern series of laptops and make a display that is better than a lot of other mid-range laptops. Sadly, that's not the case. So you do have a respectable resolution of Full HD. This is a 15.6-inch IPS panel, a standard refresh rate of 60Hz, and viewing angles are actually pretty nice on this machine. Where things start getting really depressing really fast is when you realize you only have a sRGB rating of 56%, which means colors for the most part look pretty dull, bland, and it's just not a very good laptop if you are a creative professional who's going to do photo, video editing, or color grading, or anything of that nature in general. But perhaps what's even more disappointing is that you only have a peak tested brightness of just 270 nits. This really isn't anything good. I honestly think anything less than 300 nits should not be acceptable in today's time. So if you are going to use this in bright outdoor settings or really well lit rooms, you will have a fair bit of glare. Thankfully, this is a matte finish screen, so that does help alleviate the problem to some extent. As far as performance goes, the Modern 15 is very much a productivity laptop, and on paper it has some pretty powerful specs. So most day-to-day stuff like web browsing, watching videos on YouTube or Netflix, or doing productivity tasks like Word documents or Excel crunching will be a smooth experience. Stuff like 4K video editing, which really pushes the CPU, tends to actually be a viable experience. However, I did find when you start adding multiple layers of 4K, there is a fair bit of frame drop, and you do have to really reduce the actual quality of the real-time visuals on the applications that you're using to edit your videos. With that said, however, gaming on here was decent. So the Iris Xe chipset really holds its ground. Games like GTA 5, for example, can actually run on medium settings well over 30 plus FPS. Newer games, however, usually have to be run around ultra low to low settings to achieve anything north of 30 plus FPS. The thermals department is a bit of cause for concern. So under its absolute peak load, when you're really pushing this machine to its limit, you can hit a peak surface temperature of about 48 degrees Celsius. That's right, that's quite hot and uncomfortable. Thankfully, this only happens again when you run it in unrealistically intense situations. A more average sustained temperature is still relatively high at about 41 degrees Celsius, but more bearable. Under idle loads, it can go as little as 21 degrees Celsius. As far as fan noise goes, under peak load, it can get pretty loud. Both the fans combined can make an average noise of about 44 to 45 decibels. However, I find under lower loads, this laptop can be very quiet and you hardly find the fans to actually be there. For those of you who are concerned about battery life, this is a very average laptop in the battery life department. So I got about 7.5 hours doing low to moderately intensive activities like web browsing, watching HD videos, typing up documents, and even doing a little bit of light 1080p video editing. With that said, this isn't terrible given the fact that Dell Inspiron series scores actually just south of 7 hours, but it's just not all day battery life, and if that's what you need, you may want to look elsewhere. The most disappointing element on this machine by far is the sound system. The stereo speaker setup is honestly a joke. Not only does it not get very loud, the actual distortion and audio quality is so bad that what you're actually supposed to hear versus what you hear, particularly with high-pitched noises, is an entirely awful experience. Have a quick listen for yourself.
dramatic, cause we live tragic. I can't live average, to be alive's magic. Turn it up in the back cause I'm grabbing everything I want, get in my way and I'm stabbing. I'll be moving crowds till I'm 6 feet napping. They need another fix, hooked on like an addict. I got my eyes on the prize and it's changing lives. I wanna live till I die, make a difference right. I wanna give those in need a reason to fight. I wanna live every day like...
Here's the power summary, guys. Priced at approximately 1,000 USD for the configuration we tested here, the MSI Modern 15 is definitely on the upper end of mid-range laptops, but to be fair, it does offer some pretty powerful internals. That i7 processor combined with a generous 16GB of RAM definitely makes this a powerhouse for productivity-based tasks. Also, the build quality is very much respectable. I like the use of metallic materials. With the sole exclusion of the trackpad, I definitely think this is a well-built machine. Now, some of the things holding back this laptop unfortunately include its mediocre display. The lack of color accuracy as well as low brightness levels definitely makes this a no-go for many creative users who have color sensitive needs. Also, the fact that they've included one of the worst speaker systems I've seen on laptops recently is a bit of a shameful tactic by MSI, and I really wish they just didn't cheap out so badly on it. Despite all that, however, I still think this is very much a well-balanced laptop. If you have more general productivity needs that are not color sensitive, this is a great machine. You get a lot of power. You can even do the occasional gaming with what I consider to be steady frame rates. But again, if you are a creative user, if you are someone who needs all-day battery life, or if you are someone who really likes to have a high quality trackpad, this laptop might not be the one for you. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button, sub to my channel. It genuinely helps me grow and provide more quality content for you awesome people. Catch you in the next one.